Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
Today, we're going to be looking at how to make sure your workouts are actually helping you,
Yeah.
not hurting you in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those exercises we think are good for us
Right.
could be setting us up for injuries down the line
Oh, sure.
if we're not careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to help us break this down today,
Okay.
we're going to be looking at a YouTube video featuring Dr. Majors.
Oh, cool.
He's an orthopedic doctor,
Okay.
and the fitness channel Sportology.
Awesome.
So we're getting some expert insights.
Yeah.
What's really cool about this video is that Dr. Majors actually does these little sketches to explain the physics behind joint stress.
Interesting.
And it's like
Yeah.
a total game changer when it comes to understanding how even small tweaks to your form
Right.
can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I love that.
And you know me, I love a good visual.
Oh, for sure.
So when you were going through this material, what really stood out to you?
Well, one of the things that really resonated with me was Dr. Major's whole philosophy.
Oh, yeah?
He says, you want to be in the best shape of your life the last day you're on Earth.
I like that.
It really resonated with me because it shifts the focus to long-term health and mobility, which I think is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about building a sustainable fitness routine
Right?
that will serve you well for years to come,
Yes.
not just chasing quick gains.
Yeah.
That might lead to problems down the road.
Exactly. And Dr. Majors isn't saying that any specific exercises are bad.
Okay.
It's all about your technique and making sure those exercises fit your goals and your current fitness level.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect someone who's never run before to just go out and run a marathon, right?
Right. You'd want them to start slowly,
Yeah.
gradually build up their endurance and make sure their running form is good to prevent injuries.
Exactly.
So it's the same principle with strength training.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of injuries,
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Majors had this point about cartilage damage that really hit home for me.
Okay.
You see, once cartilage is gone, it's gone.
Oh, wow.
There's no growing it back.
Really?
And that's the beginning of arthritis.
Oh, no.
So protecting our joints now is absolutely crucial.
I can admit that part kind of freaked me out.
Great.
It's a serious wake-up call to pay attention to how we're treating our bodies
Yeah,
during our workouts.
absolutely.
So how do we actually make sure we're not straining our joints?
Well, one key thing is to understand the difference between straining our muscles, which is what we want to do when we lift weights,
Right.
and straining our joints, which is what we want to avoid.
So it's not about avoiding strain altogether.
Right.
It's about making sure that strain is targeted and beneficial.
Exactly. Dr. Majors uses the example of deep squats to illustrate this.
Okay.
He shows how going too deep in a squat actually shifts the force from your muscles onto your knees.
I used to love doing deep squats.
Yeah.
But after watching Dr. Major's explanation, I'm starting to rethink things.
Interesting.
He actually does this cool little sketch
Oh, cool.
where he shows how the force on your knee joint
Okay.
multiplies as you go deeper into the squat.
Oh, wow.
You can literally see the pressure increasing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's crazy.
It's so simple, but so powerful.
Yeah.
And imagine that force on your knees every single time you do a squat.
My gosh.
For years and years.
Right.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It's kind of scary when you think about it like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you said it's not just squats either.
No, not at all.
This applies to a lot of exercises we do.
Right. This is all about understanding the mechanics of how our bodies move and how those mechanics affect the stress on our joints.
Okay, so I'm already starting to see a pattern here.
What's that?
We're not just mindlessly going through the motions.
Yeah.
We're being deliberate about our movements
Right.
and making sure we're protecting our bodies in the process.
Exactly. And one of the keys to doing that is understanding leverage.
Okay.
Dr. Majors explains how even slight adjustments to our form can change where that force is being directed.
So it's not necessarily about completely changing the exercises we do,
Right.
but about being more mindful of how we're doing them.
Yes.
I'm really starting to see how those tiny details can make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Dr. Majors gave some tips on specific exercises we can adjust.
He did.
Yeah.
And it might surprise you how small changes can protect your joints over the long haul.
Okay.
For example, he talks about how many half squats we should be doing for every full squat to really target those muscles without overstressing the knees.
Oh, yeah. He gave a very specific number there, didn't he?
He did.
That was all about leveraging our body weight in a smarter way.
Exactly.
What I loved was how he broke down something like a simple squat
Yeah.
and made us think about it in a whole new way.
He really does have a talent for that.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to unpack.
For sure.
Dr. Majors didn't just talk about squats, right?
Yeah, he didn't.
He got into some other exercises that I think a lot of us do regularly,
Yeah, like what?
like bench dips.
Yes. And bicep curls.
Oh,
Which, honestly, I never realized could be so risky if you're not careful.
This is why I love these deep dives.
Me too.
We're always learning something new, and it's often about things we thought we already knew.
It's true.
So let's dive into those other exercises.
Okay, let's do it. So with those bench dips, Dr. Majors shows how if you go too low, it forces your shoulder forward
Oh, really?
in a way that puts pressure on that joint capsule.
Wait, the capsule.
Yeah, it's basically the connective tissue that surrounds the shoulder joint,
Okay.
and going too low puts stress on that capsule and the rotator cuff.
Oh, okay. I think I felt that before.
Really?
Like a pinching sensation in my shoulder.
Exactly. Dr. Majors says if you feel that pinching, that's your body saying, hey, back up a bit.
Wow. I never would have thought something as simple as a bench dip could be so risky.
It really highlights how important it is to be mindful during our workouts
Yeah.
and pay attention to what our bodies are telling us.
Right.
Sometimes we push through pain thinking it's just part of the process,
Right.
but it could be a sign that we're doing damage.
Yeah, for sure. And then he talked about bicep curls, too.
Oh, yeah.
That's another exercise I thought was pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Majors points out that extending the arm too far actually puts more strain on the elbow joint
Interesting.
instead of working the bicep muscle.
I know. That one surprised me, too. He really emphasizes the importance of that initial bend in the bicep curl
Okay.
to establish proper leverage.
Mhm.
It's about making sure the force is directed where it should be
Right.
on the bicep muscle itself.
So we're seeing this theme of mechanical advantage come up again and again, right?
Exactly. It's all about understanding those basic principles
Hmm.
and applying them to our workouts.
This is all making me realize how important it is to have a good understanding of anatomy
Yeah.
and biomechanics when it comes to exercise.
It's true, and I think that's something that's often overlooked.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the external, how our bodies look,
Mm-hmm.
without really understanding what's going on underneath the surface.
And that's where Dr. Major's approach is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's taking those complex concepts and making them understandable
Yes.
so we can all benefit from that knowledge.
And speaking of knowledge, he gave a really specific tip about squats.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He said we should be doing 2 half squats for every full squat. Can you break down why that is?
Sure. It goes back to that idea of leverage we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
Remember, the further you bend your knees in a squat,
Mm-hmm.
the more leverage your body weight has against that knee joint.
Right.
By limiting the depth, you're reducing that leverage
Okay.
and making it easier for your muscles to handle the load.
That makes so much sense. So we're not just getting a great workout for our quads and glutes,
Right.
but we're also protecting our knees in the process.
Exactly. You know, it's funny because a lot of us go into the gym with this no pain, no gain mentality.
Yeah.
We assume that if we're not feeling at least a little bit of discomfort,
Right.
we're not really working hard enough.
For sure.
But Dr. Majors is turning that idea on its head.
You're absolutely right. He's saying you can build muscle and get a great workout
Yeah.
without pushing your body to the point of pain or risking long-term damage.
And that's so refreshing to hear,
I know, right?
especially from a doctor.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you're challenging your body
Mm-hmm.
without overloading those joints.
Yes.
And it all comes back to understanding those forces at play during different exercises.
I think a lot of us have probably experienced that good pain versus bad pain during a workout.
Oh, yeah.
But we might not always know how to distinguish between the two.
It's true.
Mhm.
I remember when I first started lifting weights,
Yeah.
I thought any kind of soreness meant I was making progress.
Mm-hmm.
But now I realize that some of that soreness was probably a sign that I was doing something wrong.
And that's where listening to your body comes in.
Yeah.
Like that subtle ache in your muscle after a tough workout.
Yeah.
Probably a good sign.
Okay.
But that sharp stabbing pain in your joint,
Oh.
that's a red flag.
So what are some tips for people who might be struggling to tell the difference?
Mm-hmm.
How can we learn to listen to our bodies more effectively?
Well, one thing Dr. Majors recommends is to really tune in to those subtle sensations during your workout.
Okay.
For example, he described feeling a particular sensation in his shoulder joint
Mm-hmm.
when he lowered himself too far during a bench dip.
Oh, right. And that sensation was a sign that he was exceeding that safe range of motion for his shoulder.
Exactly. He's encouraging us to be more present in our bodies
Yeah.
and pay attention to those little cues that can help us avoid injury.
That's so important because pain is often our body's way of telling us something is wrong. And ignoring those signals can lead to bigger problems down the line.
Absolutely.
It's about being proactive,
Right.
Not just waiting for an injury to happen
Yeah.
before we start paying attention.
Exactly. And it can be tough because there's so much information out there
Right.
about fitness and what we should be doing.
It's true. It can
Yep.
be overwhelming to try and sort through it all.
Yeah.
And sometimes that information can actually be harmful if we're not applying it correctly, which is why it's so valuable to have experts like Dr. Majors break it down for us.
I couldn't agree more. It's about empowering ourselves with the knowledge
Yeah.
to make informed decisions about our own bodies.
I think a lot of people might be thinking, okay, this is all great information,
Right.
but I don't have a doctor drawing diagrams for me at the gym.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's feeling a little lost or unsure about how to apply all of this to their own workouts?
I think finding a qualified trainer or physical therapist is a great place to start.
Okay.
Someone who can assess your individual needs and help you develop a workout plan that's safe and effective for you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all about having that personalized guidance,
Yeah.
especially when you're first starting out or if you're dealing with any pre-existing injuries.
Absolutely. And even if you consider yourself a seasoned athlete,
Oh, yeah,
it never hurts to get a form check from time to time.
that's true.
We all develop bad habits.
Right.
And sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help us identify and correct them.
So true. We're always learning and growing,
Yeah.
and that definitely applies to our fitness journeys as well.
I think what I appreciate most about Dr. Major's approach is that he's not dictating what we should or shouldn't do.
Right.
He's giving us the tools and information to make those decisions for ourselves.
It's like he's saying, here's how your body works.
Yeah.
Now go out and use that knowledge to move in a way that feels good and supports your long-term health.
Exactly. And that's such a powerful message.
So we've covered a lot of ground. But there's still one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Okay. What is it?
Well, we've been talking a lot about preventing injury and exercising safely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the other side of the coin.
Okay.
What about people who are already dealing with joint pain or injuries?
Yeah.
Does Dr. Major's approach have anything to offer them?
That's a great question. And the answer is a resounding yes.
Really?
In fact, he has a whole series of videos specifically for people with different types of injuries and conditions.
Oh, wow. So he's really covering all the bases.
He is. And it's amazing because he's showing people that even if they have limitations, they can still find ways to move their bodies safely and effectively.
So even if you're dealing with an injury,
Yeah.
it's not a reason to give up on exercise altogether.
Absolutely not. It just means you might need to modify your approach.
This is so important because I think a lot of people with injuries might feel discouraged
Right?
or like they can't exercise at all.
Yeah.
But Dr. Majors is showing them that there are options.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why I think his work is so revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just talking about exercise. He's talking about empowering people to take control of their health and well-being.
And that message of empowerment is so powerful.
Yes.
It's about recognizing that we have choices
Mm-hmm.
and that we can actively participate in our own healing and recovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We've had such a fascinating discussion today,
I know.
and I feel like I've learned so much from Dr. Major's insights.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
really made me rethink my approach to exercise
Yeah.
and the importance of prioritizing those little details that can make a big difference in the long run.
And you know, as much as we've covered,
Yeah,
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what Dr. Majors has to offer.
I agree. There's so much more to explore.
Well, we'll definitely have to do another deep dive into his work in the future.
I'm in.
But for now, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on.
We have. And hopefully they're feeling just as inspired as we are.
Yeah.
To move their bodies in a smarter, safer, and more sustainable way.
I know I am. And I'm already looking at my own workouts with a fresh perspective.
Me too. I'm thinking about all the little tweaks and adjustments I can make to improve my form and protect my joints.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Major's work,
Okay.
what's one key takeaway you would want her listeners to remember?
That's a tough one. There are so many. But if I had to choose just one,
Yeah.
I would say it's this. Pay attention to those subtle signals your body is giving you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ignore pain, and don't be afraid to modify exercises to make them work for you.
That's a great one. And it really goes back to that idea of empowerment we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
We have the power to make choices that support our health and well-being,
Right.
both in and out of the gym.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up.
All right, let's do it.
So we talked about Dr. Major's advice on how to make our workouts safer and more effective.
Sure.
But before we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's one big takeaway that you think our listeners should remember?
I think the biggest thing is to shift away from that no pain, no gain mentality. You know, it's not about pushing yourself to the point of pain or risking injury. It's about finding a way to move that feels good, that challenges you, but that also supports your long-term health.
I love that. Train smart, not just hard.
Right.
And Dr. Majors gave us so many tools to do just that.
He did.
He emphasized focusing on quality over quantity.
Yes.
Listening to our bodies. And even finding a qualified trainer who
Yeah.
can help personalize our approach.
Absolutely.
And he really drove home the importance of understanding those forces at play during different exercises.
It's like he gave us a secret decoder ring to unlock the mysteries of our own bodies.
I love that.
We can use this knowledge to make informed decisions about how we move. And I think that's incredibly empowering.
It really is. So as we wrap up, is there a question we can leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they go about their day and think about their own workouts.
I think a great question is, what other exercises might you be doing that could benefit from a Dr. Major's makeover?
Well, I like that.
You know, we've only scratched the surface here today.
Right.
So it's worth taking a look at your own routine and seeing if there are any areas where you could apply his principles.
I love that challenge. Because ultimately the goal is to find a way to move that feels good.
Yes.
That supports our long-term health. And that keeps us active and engaged in our bodies for years to come.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights. And feel empowered to make your workouts work for you, not against you.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving.